The fluorescent tube above him has a dying flicker. It pulses at exactly the wrong rhythm, fast enough to notice, slow enough that you can't stop counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, flicker, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, flicker. David Smith has been counting for 6 minutes, which is how long it takes a guard to walk a prisoner from the visiting booth back through processing and into the corridor that leads to the women's wing. There's a scratch on the plexiglass divider. It runs diagonally from the upper left corner to roughly the center, and David has been staring at it because staring at the scratch is easier than staring at the empty chair on the other side. His wife was sitting there 90 seconds ago. Her hand was on the glass. The warmth of her palm left a fading oval of condensation. He watched it shrink while she was being led away, watched it contract like a pupil adjusting to sudden light, until the glass was clean again and there was no proof she'd ever been there at all. The phone receiver is still warm against his ear. He hasn't hung it up. The dial tone hums. That flat, mechanical drone that is the sound of a conversation that has ended but hasn't been released. He puts the phone down. Let me take you back to the night it started. The night I poured my 6th coffee and still had 6 hours to go. The surveillance apartment smelled like microwave popcorn that wasn't theirs. Some previous team had left the ghost of it in the carpet, a faintly chemical, faintly buttery odor that lived in the fibers along with a burn mark near the kitchenette, where someone's hot plate had made a break for it. A strip of duct tape covered the scorch mark, its edges curling upward like a dead leaf that couldn't commit to falling off. There was a water stain on the ceiling. David had decided it looked like California, specifically the part near Bakersfield, which felt appropriate because nothing good ever happened near Bakersfield. He'd been staring at that stain for 6 nights, and 6 nights of staring had not improved its geography. The thermos flask coffee had started the shift hot. By hour 2, it was warm. By 4, room temperature. Now, at hour 6, it had reached the specific degree that made you question not just the coffee, but every professional decision that had led to a life where you drank it. He poured another cup anyway. The cup didn't judge him. The cup understood. Beside him, Special Agent Camilla Baxter was doing the thing she did when she was concentrating. Her head tilted slightly left, like she was trying to hear something the microphones weren't picking up. She had a small gold crucifix on a thin chain, her Colombian mother's, and her thumb was moving across it in that unconscious rhythm she fell into when she was thinking. She didn't know she did it. David knew she didn't know. He knew this because he'd spent 5 joint operations sitting close enough to notice, which was also close enough to catch the faint citrus of whatever she used in her hair, which he had never asked about, because asking would mean admitting proximity, and admitting proximity would mean admitting everything underneath it. She tapped her pen against her bottom lip. Twice. Always twice. Then wrote something in her notebook. On the other side of the desk, FBI agent Andrew Rogic had his 4 pens arranged parallel, equidistant, caps facing north. David had asked about the pens once. Andrew had said, force of habit, in a tone that closed the conversation like a filing cabinet drawer. It was 11:07 p.m., which meant Andrew's gas station turkey club would be appearing in approximately 3 minutes. The man unwrapped those sandwiches with a ceremonial precision that suggested they were the last reliable ritual in his life. David respected that. Rituals mattered when the rest of the world refused to stay organized. The headphones pressed grooves into the cartilage of David's ears. After 4 hours, the grooves became part of you. Not painful exactly, but present. Like a ring you've worn so long you only notice it when you take it off. The specific exhaustion of surveillance work was not physical. It was attentional. Your body learned to hold alert in the spine while your mind went soft at the edges, drifting toward grocery lists and mortgage payments and the question of whether your wife was asleep yet. And then the guilt of drifting, because drifting was how you missed the one sentence, the one name, the one slip that could crack a case wide open. 6 days, 6 12-hour shifts, and LaShawn Big Daddy Johnson had given them nothing. The operation was straightforward on paper. LaShawn Johnson, suspected of being one of the largest distributors of party drugs in LA County. Cocaine primarily, supplemented by a range of amphetamines, the chemical fuel of nightclubs, private parties, and the specific variety of Los Angeles recreation that ran on powder and plausible deniability. His crew consisted of Vernon Robinson, a bodyguard built like a vending machine who lived permanently upstairs, and Tyson T.J. Jones, the runner, the recruiter, the man who went to the clubs every night and came back with women. The problem was elegant in its simplicity. LaShawn didn't leave his house. He took no calls they could intercept. He received no visitors they could connect to distribution. The cameras showed a 2-story house in a commercial area where nothing went in and nothing came out except TJ and his nightly collection of women. And sex. The nightly 2-hour performances that TJ facilitated. Women brought back from clubs for LaShawn, Vernon, and TJ to enjoy. Night after night. Different women, same result. No business discussed before, during, or after. David had a theory, unformed, more instinct than idea, that something about these women didn't add up, but he couldn't say what. And in federal law enforcement, a feeling without evidence was just an opinion wearing a badge. The apartment door opened. Special Agent Roger Withers entered, 50s, gray at the temples, carrying the kind of tired that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with decades.
Good evening, sir.
Agent Smith, how are we doing on this fine Tuesday evening?
The target is in the primary residence along with 4 of his crew. Most conversations we've tracked are between Johnson and Robinson upstairs. 3 others are downstairs. No movement of note.
How about Tyson Jones? Has he been in tonight?
Not yet, sir. TJ usually arrives around 2 a.m., usually with company.
Roger checked his watch, looked at Camilla, at Andrew, at the monitors showing the dark exterior of LaShawn's residence, the porch light casting its yellow cone onto an empty stoop.
It's been 6 days. All we know is that they like to talk shit and have sex with women TJ brings from clubs. We need more than that. A lot more.
Agreed, sir. We'll see what we can get tonight.
Roger moved toward the door, then paused. Camilla and Andrew had already turned back to the monitors. Roger caught David's eye, a look that was not for the room, but for the 2 of them, boss and agent, the private frequency they'd been using since the last case went sideways.
Don't let this one go the same way, David. I used up a lot of capital keeping you on.
Then he was gone. The door closed. The apartment was 3 people and a burnt carpet again. The last case. The wound David kept touching without meaning to. It surfaced now, triggered by Roger's look, by the pressure of 6 empty nights, by the taste of bad coffee and institutional failure. 4 months ago, this same team, David as operational lead, Camilla as his partner, 2 other agents, had spent weeks building a case against a mid-level trafficker. They were coming up short on evidence. It was Camilla who'd proposed flipping one of the target's associates, turning him into an informant. The plan was smart. The logic was sound. David approved it. The informant burned them inside of 72 hours, fed everything back to the target. The case collapsed like a building with its foundation pulled out. David took the blame, not because it was entirely his, but because the operational lead carries the weight, and because Camilla had offered to share it, and he'd refused. That refusal had created something between them that was simultaneously professional debt and personal loyalty, and neither of them had figured out where one ended and the other began. The other agents hadn't shunned him afterward. That would have been simpler. Instead, they'd been careful, the particular distance people maintain around someone whose luck might be contagious. Like sitting too far from a man with a cold. Not cruelty, just self-preservation. This case needed to go differently. David didn't need 2 high-level failures back-to-back. That kind of record didn't just stall a career, it ended one. His personal phone pinged. The sound was small in the quiet apartment, but it landed like a stone dropped into still water. He checked the screen. Nora, 1:07 a.m. What time are you getting home tonight? I'm getting tired of sleeping alone. David stared at the 12 words. He could see her, exactly where she was, exactly how she looked. Their bed, her side. The lamp on the nightstand casting that warm cone across the book she'd been reading for 3 months without finishing. He knew which chapter she kept returning to, the one where the couple reconciles. He'd picked the book up off the nightstand once, and the spine had fallen open to that page automatically, softened and creased from repeated visits. He hadn't said anything about it. He should
I
have.
understand.
That was the kind of thing he should have said something about.
I really do.
He knew the quality of her loneliness because he'd felt it from the other direction, the specific silence of a house where someone is supposed to be and isn't. He'd been that silence for her. He knew it. Knowing it changed nothing about the fact that LaShawn Johnson was still in that house across the street and this case was still circling the drain.
I promise I'll see you before you leave for work in the morning. Love you.
The reply came quickly, 3 words.
Okay, love you too.
His reply was tender. Hers was clipped. The difference in temperature between those 2 messages was a fissure, so thin you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. But fissures are how walls come down, not through one large crack, through 1,000 hairline fractures that nobody notices until the structure gives way. David set the phone face down on the desk, picked up the thermos, poured another cup of coffee that didn't deserve to be called coffee, and as he sat back down, pulling the headphones back over the grooves they'd already carved, 3 memories surfaced. Not because he summoned them, because 1 a.m. has its own gravity, and guilt is the heaviest thing it pulls. The loan. The day Nora got approved for her half of the salon. She'd called him from the bank parking lot, and he could hear her hands shaking through the phone, a tremor in her voice that wasn't fear. It was the specific vibration of a woman who'd been told no by every institution that had ever evaluated her and had finally heard yes. She kept saying, "We did it." Not I. We. That pronoun mattered to David more than any dollar amount on the loan documents. It meant she still saw them as a unit. It meant the walls were still holding. The bath. 6 months ago, after the failed case, after the informant, the debrief, the look on Roger's face that arrived 3 seconds before the words, David came home at 11 p.m. looking like something that had been left out in the rain and forgotten. Nora didn't ask what happened. She didn't offer advice. She didn't deploy the kind of motivational language people use when they have no idea what else to do. She ran a bath, put his favorite beer on the porcelain edge, then sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the cabinet, scrolling her phone, saying nothing while he soaked. She didn't try to fix it. She just stayed in the room. That was the thing. She stayed. The mug. Every morning. Even mornings after arguments. Even mornings when neither of them had spoken since the previous night's cold silence. Nora left David's coffee mug on the counter with the handle facing right. Because he was right-handed. She'd done it since they moved in together. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a gesture she was aware of making. It was the kind of unconscious care that lived below language, in the muscle memory of a person who had loved you long enough to automate the small kindnesses. These were the marriage, not the fights, not the late nights, not the growing distance or the clipped text messages, or the silence that had started filling rooms the way water fills a sinking boat, slowly, then everywhere. The mug, the bath, the parking lot call. These were what was real. They needed to be real, because the story was about to break them. 10 days of nothing. That's not entirely accurate. 10 days of something, but the something was useless. 10 days of Vernon's double cough, always in pairs, the second louder than the first, like the first was just a rehearsal. 10 days of TJ's footstep pattern on the internal stairs, heavy on the left, lighter on the right, some old injury he compensated for without thinking. The exact creak of the third step from the top, a sound David could now identify in an audio lineup with the confidence of a man who'd heard it 400 times. The surveillance had its own weather. Quiet nights felt cold regardless of the thermostat. Noisy nights, the nights TJ brought women back, felt claustrophobic. The apartment walls contracting around 3 agents who were trained in firearms and constitutional law and were currently being paid federal salaries to listen to strangers have sex. That was the part David never got used to, not the sex itself. He wasn't a Puritan, and the sounds were abstract enough through the microphones to maintain professional distance. What he couldn't get comfortable with was the specific indignity of the situation. 3 college-educated adults, sitting in a room that smelled like someone else's microwave popcorn, taking notes in government-issued notebooks, while a man they couldn't arrest had marathon sex with women they couldn't identify. This was the job. This was what field work looked like at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday.
She didn't recognize me.
Through the audio feed, David had started to know LaShawn Johnson in ways the case file couldn't capture. One night, caught on the upstairs microphones, LaShawn's voice dropped below its usual performative bass. Lower, quieter, the register people use when they're not performing for anyone. He was talking to Vernon about his mother. She was in a care facility in Inglewood. LaShawn paid for it.
Did you drop off the check this week?
Yeah, handled it Monday.
Make sure they're giving her the right room. She likes the one with the window facing the garden, not the parking lot side. The garden.
David wrote it down. It wasn't evidence. It wouldn't appear in any brief. But it was a crack in the flatness of a target. A reminder that the voice on the other end of the microphone belonged to a man who loved his mother enough to know which window she preferred. David didn't need to find this sympathetic. He needed it to be true. True targets were harder to underestimate than cardboard ones. And then there was TJ. Through the external microphones near the entrance, David heard him greeting the women he brought home, and the transformation was remarkable. TJ's voice changed, warmer, slower, textured with a genuine curiosity that didn't sound manufactured. He asked questions, remembered details.
Didn't you say last time you were thinking about opening your own place? How's that going?
He wasn't just buying their attention with drugs. He was making them feel interesting, seen. It was a specific talent, the kind that looked effortless but probably wasn't. The social engineering of a man who understood that people opened their wallets and their legs for the same reason, because someone made them feel like they mattered. This detail. This would matter later. The nightly sex created a pressure in the surveillance apartment that nobody acknowledged and everybody felt. When the sounds escalated, and they escalated nightly, usually around 2 a.m., usually for 90 minutes to 2 hours, the three of them developed unspoken protocols. David focused harder on his notebook. Camilla adjusted her headphones with a precision that suggested intense professional concentration and not what it actually was, which was the need to do something with her hands. Andrew would make a dry observation.
At this rate, we should bill them for the entertainment.
The joke functioned as a pressure valve, releasing just enough tension to keep the room professional, the way you'd crack a window in a car that's fogging up. Not fixing the problem, just making it survivable. But underneath the protocols, underneath the professionalism and the notebooks and Andrew's timed observations, there was the proximity to Camilla. David was aware of her breathing during the quiet parts between the moans from the headphones, the way it accelerated slightly, a half-beat faster, before she caught it and brought it back under control. He was aware of his own breathing doing the same thing, and the awareness of the awareness created a feedback loop that he handled the way he handled all complicated feelings. By not handling it. During one of these nights, a Thursday, the sounds from LaShawn's house rhythmic and unrelenting, Camilla reached up to adjust her headphones, and her fingers brushed against David's hand where it rested on the desk between them. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did he. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds. Skin against skin, accidental, meaningless. Both of them were still aware of it an hour later. And in the privacy of his own skull, David ran calculations he knew were beneath him. His 20 to 30 minutes with Nora versus LaShawn's apparent marathons. The comparison was petty. It was irrelevant. It was the kind of arithmetic that the male ego performed without submitting a request to the rational mind for approval. The rational mind would have rejected it. The ego didn't ask. It was now Friday, day 14. David's shift had started at 6. It was almost 10 p.m., and he figured he'd call Nora before she went to bed, to check in, to smooth over whatever anxiety she carried from not seeing her husband for days at a stretch. The last time they'd been in the same room was Thursday morning, and that exchange had been clipped and cool, 2 people passing in a hallway who used to share a bed. He stepped away from the monitors. Before calling, he hesitated, phone in hand, thumb over her name. He pictured the call going to voicemail, Nora already asleep, her body curled toward his empty side of the mattress, the phone face down on the nightstand beside the book that always fell open to the same page. He pictured calling and hearing her happy, out somewhere, surrounded by noise and people, living a life he wasn't part of. He called. It rang 4 times. Went to voicemail. He stared at the screen. Then it rang. Nora calling back.
Hey, sorry for calling so late.
That's okay. I'm just out with Alicia. We're having drinks after work.
Music behind her, loud, club music, bass and synthetic drums and the compressed energy of a room full of people determined to have a good time. And underneath Nora's voice, the slight softening of consonants that told David she'd been drinking. Not drunk, past the point where her filters were fully engaged. And there, buried in the noise, under the bass and the chatter, David recognized a song. It was on their wedding playlist. Nora had picked it. He didn't know if she'd noticed it playing behind her. He didn't know which possibility was worse, that she'd heard their song in a nightclub and felt nothing, or that she'd heard it and chosen not to say.
It's almost 10 p.m. That's a bit late to still be out having drinks after work, isn't it? And it sounds like you're at a club.
So, what's that got to do with you?
Look, I'm sorry I haven't been around much, but that doesn't mean you should be out getting drunk in nightclubs. You know I'm not okay with that.
Well, maybe you should be at home with your wife more often. If not, then I'm free to go out with Alicia and have my own fun.
What does that mean? Having your own fun?
Fuck holding on, David. I'm always holding on alone. I might as well be single. I don't even like being at home anymore. That place is cold and empty.
You don't mean that. Just go home, Nora. We'll talk in the morning when you've...
Don't patronize me, and I'm not going home. I'm staying with Alicia now. I moved into her place last night, and I'm betting you didn't even notice.
Let's go.
Silence. Not because David had nothing to say. He had words, plenty of them, lined up and ready. But the words that mattered weren't about the move. They were about the not noticing. His wife had packed bags, removed herself from their shared home, and he hadn't registered her absence for at least 24 hours. He ran through the explanations, the shifts, the exhaustion, the case consuming every waking hour, and every one of them was true. And every one of them was an indictment.
Can we talk tomorrow?
Maybe. Are you going off to work in the afternoon to spend the entire evening away again?
You know I have to.
Then maybe I'll see you when I see you.
The call ended. David stood in the hallway outside the surveillance apartment, the phone dark in his hand, the sound of the dead line still ringing in the bones of his ear. Alicia Jackson, Nora's best friend, her business partner, her confidant. David knew Alicia the way husbands know their wife's closest friend, through anecdotes, through Saturday brunches, through the particular frequency of Nora's voice when she talked about her. Alicia had been single for 3 months. Her ex, a firefighter named Marcus, had been sleeping with a nurse from his station. The discovery had detonated something in Alicia's worldview that hadn't been rebuilt. Her current operating thesis was that all men were fundamentally untrustworthy, and the only defense was independence. She loved Nora fiercely. She also projected her own wreckage onto Nora's marriage with the specific blindness of a woman who needed her best friend to validate her own choices. David suspected Alicia was pulling Nora away from him. He carried that suspicion like a splinter under the skin, always present, never quite enough to justify digging out. He stepped back into the apartment. Camilla looked up from the monitors. Her face held an expression he could read because he'd spent 5 cases learning it. She'd heard the conversation through the thin walls. Apartment walls in buildings like this were confessions waiting to happen.
David, are you okay?
Yeah, just a little trouble at home.
If you need to talk...
Thanks, Mila. I'll be okay. Let's just focus on getting something on these guys.
He sat back down at the monitors. As he did, Camilla wordlessly slid her untouched coffee toward him, 3 inches to the left, into his space, and stood to make herself a new one. She didn't explain. She didn't draw attention to it. Just a cup of coffee, still warm, pushed quietly across a desk. David wrapped his hands around the ceramic. For 3 seconds, exactly 3, he felt slightly less alone. Then he put the headphones back on and returned to the sounds of someone else's house, someone else's life, and the steady accumulation of nothing that would, in 7 more days, become everything. The following Thursday. The air in the surveillance apartment had a density David recognized, the heaviness of a conversation that had happened before he arrived. Camilla was at the monitors. Andrew was at his desk, pens aligned. and Roger Withers was standing near the door with the posture of a man delivering news he'd already delivered once and was about to deliver again.
The higher-ups are conducting a resource allocation review. What that means, in case anyone was wondering, is that if you don't give me something by next week, a name, a connection, a pattern, anything, this operation gets shut down.
We would have used something if we had it.
I know that. I'm telling you what I was told. Justify the continuation or pack it up.
After Roger left, the three of them sat in the particular silence of professionals who were good at their jobs and couldn't get the evidence to cooperate. Camilla had her arms crossed, the crucifix between her thumb and finger. Andrew's sandwich sat half unwrapped on the desk, abandoned mid-ceremony.
What about the women?
What about them?
We've been assuming they're random. Club pickups, free blow, and a good time.
But how can we confirm
But
that
what if
without
they're
any
not?
concrete evidence?
What if they're the ones distributing for him?
If they're there for business, why do they have sex with these guys every time and never discuss anything work-related?
Just sounds like sex and free blow to me. Maybe, but something doesn't add up.
He couldn't articulate what. The evidence supported their reading. His gut didn't. And gut feelings, in the absence of data, were just opinions that happened to live in your stomach. They reviewed TJ's club visits, the logs of locations, dates, times. David spread the data across the desk, looking for a pattern. A specific venue visited regularly. A monthly cycle. Anything that suggested structure behind what appeared to be randomness. The data scattered like dropped coins. No pattern, not on a weekly basis. Maybe monthly. But they wouldn't have time to confirm a monthly cycle before the operation got killed. There was one data point David hadn't shared. 10 days earlier, day 17 of the surveillance, TJ had brought 3 women home. One of them, visible under the porch light for just a moment, had triggered a recognition that tightened David's stomach. Jane Thompson, a makeup artist who worked occasionally at Nora's salon. David knew her face from the salon's Instagram page, from 2 or 3 casual mentions Nora had made about clients who requested Jane specifically. He'd held the information back. If Jane was just a random club pickup, free blow, sex, gone by sunrise, reporting her would mean declaring a personal connection and potentially pulling himself off the case. With the case already dying, he couldn't afford to lose his seat. And Jane hadn't returned. One visit. One night. Random. He told himself the decision was justified. He told himself that frequently. It was past 1 a.m. when Andrew looked up from his screen.
Heads up, TJ's back early tonight. 3 women.
David and Camilla took their positions, headphones on. The exterior camera fed its gray-blue image to their monitors. TJ approaching the front door, 3 figures behind him, moving through the dark toward the porch light's yellow circle. Under the light, as TJ knocked, the first face rotated toward the camera. Blonde hair, features resolving through the surveillance grain. Jane Thompson. Again. David's pulse shifted. Not faster exactly, but differently. A repeat visit. Random hookups didn't come back. Customers did. His theory about the women, his unsubstantiated gut feeling, suddenly had its first data point. Then the other 2 women turned. The pros should slow here. I want to slow it down because David's world is about to split in half, and the speed at which it happens is part of the cruelty. 1 second, he is a DEA agent watching a surveillance feed. The next second, he is a husband watching his wife walk into a drug dealer's house at 1 a.m. There is no transition between those 2 men. They exist simultaneously. And the body, which is faster than the mind, responds first. His coffee cup, halfway between the desk and his mouth. Suspended. The screen's blue light painting his face in the color of something clinical. The resolution of the camera was adequate, sharp enough to identify, blurry enough that for one desperate animal fraction of a second, he tried to convince his eyes they were wrong. The way you stare at a word you've misspelled and try to force it into correctness, because admitting the error means admitting everything that follows from it. Alicia Jackson. On the left. And Nora Smith. Light brown hair catching the porch light. His wife. Standing at the front door of LaShawn Johnson's residence at 1 in the morning, waiting to be let inside. His gut dropped. Not a metaphor. an actual physiological event, the blood draining from his abdominal cavity as the sympathetic nervous system redirected it to his extremities, preparing for a threat the body recognized before the brain had finished processing it. His peripheral vision grayed. The sounds in his headphones went muffled, as though someone had lowered him slowly into deep water. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat, in his temples, in his fingertips, which had gone white against the edge of the desk. Camilla's hand, on the desk, between the coffee cup and the notebook. She had met Nora twice, at agency functions, once at a restaurant where the four of them had almost double-dated before the logistics fell apart. She knew who was on that screen. The hand wasn't romance. It was operational. The hand of a partner whose job included keeping the other partner functional when the mission detonated in your lap. The hand said, "I'm here. Don't fall." They were let inside. The audio switched from exterior to interior microphones. Downstairs greetings, LaShawn's crew, casual, the sounds of a door closing, then footsteps ascending the stairs, TJ's uneven gait, the creak of the third step, and behind it, lighter footfalls. Women's shoes on hardwood, upstairs, LaShawn and Vernon waiting, drinks being poured, ice against glass. Introductions. David heard his wife's voice come through the government-issued headphones clipped to his government-issued ears. Her real voice, the one that had said, "Love you," and "We did it," and "Can we talk tonight?" Now arriving from inside a drug suspect's residence.
Is that a wedding ring?
Yes, it is.
He mustn't be getting the job done, huh?
No, not even close.
Each word entered David at the point where professional composure met personal annihilation. Not like a blade. Blades are dramatic. Like a needle. Small. Precise. Finding the gap between the armor plates and sliding in without resistance. Then the exchange that changed the case.
I've been waiting for this opportunity ever since you first went into business with Alicia and Jane a few months back. We share everything, you know.
In business. Months. Share everything. The agent's brain fired first. The women were the distributors. The women were the network. Every night of inane chatter and meaningless sex sounds, the case had been there the entire time, hiding behind the one element they'd dismissed as irrelevant. LaShawn's operation wasn't using the clubs as meeting points for dealers. He was using the women as the dealers. The sex was the cover. The business was the women.
You were right, David. It's the women. They're the distributors. TJ isn't meeting random women. He's bringing in the women that are selling their product.
We need to go back through every ID we have on these women. All of them. This could be the break.
David nodded. Professional. Functional. Dying. Camilla's hand tightened on his. And then the talking stopped. The small talk, the drink sounds, the laughter that David could identify as his wife's because he'd heard that laugh for years. It all went quiet. What replaced it was softer. Moans, giggles, the rustle of clothing being removed. The particular acoustic shift that occurs when people stop performing socially and start performing physically.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Go slow. You're so much bigger than what I'm used to.
Take all of it, Nora. It's like being a virgin all over again.
David removed his headphones. The sound died mid-gasp. He stood. The chair scraped back against the carpet. That same carpet with the duct tape and the burn mark and the smell of someone else's popcorn. He walked toward the door.
I'll be right back.
She said it to Andrew,
We need to go.
then followed David into the hallway.
Not without me.
He was leaning against the wall. The hallway smelled like laundry detergent from a neighbor's unit and the specific institutional blankness that all apartment corridors share, the smell of a space that belongs to everyone and therefore no one. Camilla stood beside him. Her hand found his again.
I'm so sorry, David. It's bad enough to find out your wife is cheating, but having to listen to it.
I needed to hear it. At least until they started. I had to know for sure that it's over.
A pause. The muted sounds from inside the apartment were still faintly audible through the door. Someone's pleasure. Someone's devastation. Separated by 3 inches of hollow core wood.
The blonde, Jane Thompson. She's a makeup artist who works at my wife's salon sometimes. I recognized her when she visited the first time 10 days ago. I should have reported it then. I was hoping it was random, a one-time thing.
And did you learn anything from Nora? About Jane, her contacts?
No, Nora moved out before I could. She's been at Alicia's, Alicia Jackson, the other woman in there right now.
That's going to complicate things. They're lawyers.
I know. That's why I need to step away right now. If these women are distributing for LaShawn, they're suspects. I can't be anywhere near this.
They stood together for a few more minutes. David felt the pull, the one he'd been suppressing for years, the gravity of her beside him, the desire to step forward and wrap his arms around her and let the warmth of another person's body absorb everything he'd just heard. He didn't. Not because the impulse was wrong, because acting on it now would make it about escape rather than about her. And Camilla deserved better timing than the worst night of his life. They went back inside. The headphones on the desk were still transmitting. Through the tiny speakers, David could hear the rhythmic sounds continuing, distant, tinny, relentless.
Agent Rogic, I need to declare a conflict of interest and excuse myself from this case immediately.
What are you talking about?
We can identify all three women. Jane Thompson is the blonde, Alicia Jackson is the black woman, and Nora Smith is the one with the light brown hair.
Camilla paused, looked at David, then at Andrew.
She's Agent Smith's wife.
Oh, fuck, David. I'm so sorry. I have no idea what you're going through right now.
Thanks, Andrew, but I need to leave. I want you two to continue recording. The women are the distributors, probably through their businesses, to their clientele. You'll need to identify every woman who's visited that house and pull their financials. I'll brief Roger in the morning.
Call me later, David, all right?
He nodded, turned, walked out the door, down the hallway, through the lobby, and into the Los Angeles night. The air was warm, the kind of warm that didn't cool after dark, that sat on your skin like a presence you hadn't invited. He got in his car, started the engine, sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel, not moving, staring through the windshield at a street that looked exactly the same as it had 12 hours ago and was now a completely different place. He drove home to an empty house, a house that had been empty for days, a house whose emptiness he was only now, at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday night, beginning to understand. Dr. Mind Commentary. 1. I need to stop the story here, because what just happened to David Smith is not simply a man discovering his wife's affair. What happened is something far rarer, far more psychologically damaging, and, in my 15 years of clinical practice, something I've encountered exactly twice. Both times the damage took years to fully surface. Both times the men sitting in my office couldn't explain why the discovery haunted them differently than it haunted other betrayed spouses. I could. The medium was the wound. David didn't find a text message. He didn't walk in on them. He didn't hear it secondhand from a friend over a careful, pitying lunch. He listened to it in real time, through professional surveillance equipment as part of his federally mandated job. Dr. Jennifer Freyd at the University of Oregon coined the term betrayal trauma to describe the specific psychological injury that occurs when the person you depend on for emotional survival, your partner, your parent, your closest bond, is the person who violates that trust. Her research demonstrated that the neurological response to betrayal trauma is distinct from ordinary trauma. The brain doesn't experience it as a threat to your safety. It experiences it as a threat to yourself, your identity, your reality, your fundamental understanding of what is true. But David's experience compounds this in a way that even Freyd's framework doesn't fully accommodate. He was professionally obligated to listen. His training kept him in that chair. His duty held the headphones to his ears. The very competencies that make him excellent at his job, discipline, composure, the capacity to absorb disturbing information without visible reaction, are the competencies that prevented him from protecting himself. The good agent and the wounded husband occupied the same body, using the same ears, and neither could save the other. And then there's what Nora said. Not even close. 3 words. Doctor. Esther Perel, who has spent decades studying infidelity in her clinical practice, observes that betrayed partners almost always fixate on the sexual details, not because the sex matters most objectively, but because the comparison activates the deepest human terror: I was not enough. When Nora says not even close, she is, without any knowledge that her husband is listening, retroactively editing the sexual history of their entire marriage. Every night he touched her, every time she responded, every moment he believed he had satisfied her. All of it is now rewritten by 3 words spoken in a stranger's bedroom to a man she shouldn't have been with. Whether she intended this cruelty is beside the point. Impact does not require intent. A bullet doesn't need to know your name. I want to note one more thing. Camilla's hand. In moments of acute psychological trauma, physical contact activates the vagus nerve and initiates a parasympathetic response, lowering heart rate, reducing cortisol production, signaling to the panicking brain that the body is not entirely alone. Her hand on David's was not romance. It was first aid. The simplest, oldest intervention one human being can offer another. Touch that says you are here, you are real, you are not the only person in this room. He was, of course, profoundly alone in what was happening to him. Nobody else in that apartment was losing a marriage, but the hand helped. The hand kept him in the chair for the 90 additional seconds it took to hear the sentence that broke the case wide open. And that is the cruelest irony in this entire story. The worst moment of David Smith's personal life produced the most significant breakthrough of his professional career. Those 2 events are now fused together permanently, welded by the same pair of headphones, encoded in the same neural pathways, stored in the same memory. He will never be able to recall the triumph without hearing the betrayal. He will never process the grief without remembering the victory. The body keeps score, even when the mind stops counting. The house was empty in a way it hadn't been before. David stood in the kitchen at 7 a.m., still wearing last night's clothes, and tried to identify what had changed. The counters were the same. The fridge hummed its same single note. The kitchen drawer that stuck, the one he'd never fixed, the one Nora had stopped asking about, was in the same position it had been in for months, slightly open because the wood swelled in humidity and neither of them had bothered to shove it fully closed. But the emptiness was different now. A week ago, this had been the absence of his wife, the house minus Nora, a temporary subtraction. She was at Alicia's, she'd come back. The equation would rebalance. Now it was the absence of the woman he'd thought his wife was, the house minus a person who had never fully existed. That was a different kind of empty, the kind that didn't resolve by someone walking back through the door. He showered, stood under the water without moving, his mind doing what it did best, replaying audio. Not the sex. He'd cut that feed before the worst of it, pulled the headphones off, walked away. What his brain replayed was the conversation before. Nora's voice saying, "I've been waiting for this opportunity." The quality of her laugh at LaShawn's joke about the wedding ring, not nervous, not uncomfortable, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't heard directed at him in months. And not even close. He realized he'd been standing under the water for 25 minutes. It had gone cold at some point and he hadn't noticed. He shut it off, toweled, caught his own eyes in the bathroom mirror and held them a beat longer than usual. The way you look at someone you're trying to place. By 11 a.m. he was in Roger Withers' office, door closed, explaining everything. Roger sat behind his desk and listened with the stillness of a man who'd heard a version of this before. Not in a briefing room, in his own kitchen, years ago. His ex-wife hadn't sold drugs or slept with surveillance targets, but the fundamental architecture was the same. A marriage that had died from absence, autopsied by a man who'd been too busy building his career to notice the patient flatlining.
Christ, David, I'm sorry.
I appreciate that, sir. But I have an idea, and I need it to happen today.
I'm listening.
Nora called me this morning. She wants to meet, to talk about us. If we're right that these women are LaShawn's distribution network, then Nora is one of his distributors. I want a warrant to place a listening device on her, secretly. Use her to uncover the whole operation.
You want to bug your own wife?
I want to bug a suspect. The fact that she's my wife is the reason I have access.
And once the device is placed,
I'm out. No further involvement. Clean break.
Roger studied him, searching perhaps for the thing that supervisors are trained to look for in moments like these. The tremor in the voice, the wetness in the eyes, the signals that a man is making operational decisions from an emotional place. He didn't find them. David's voice was flat, controlled. A new register, colder than anything Roger had heard from him before.
a DEA agent bugging his own wife. If a defense attorney gets hold of this,
I'm not flipping her. I'm not offering a deal. I want her buried as deep as the rest of them.
Roger looked at him for a long time.
get down to technical operations, pick up the device, make it look like something she'd keep in her bag. I'll have the warrant ready by the time you reach the courthouse.
At 2 p.m., David was sitting in a cafe 2 doors from Nora's salon. The warrant was in his jacket. The listening device, shaped like a matte black USB thumb drive, unremarkable, the kind of thing that accumulated in the bottom of handbags and junk drawers, was in his other pocket. He'd arrived 10 minutes early. He had cataloged the cafe, the exit behind the counter, the 2 windows facing the street, the distance between his chair and the door. Old habits. The agent's brain never fully powered down. Nora walked in. Salon clothes, minimal makeup, auburn hair pulled back for work. She set her handbag on the table, the bag she carried everywhere, the one with the small zipper pocket near the front, and rummaged through it for her purse.
Have you ordered already?
Yeah, sorry. Didn't know how long you'd be.
Okay, I'll be right back.
She stood and walked to the counter. David looked at the bag, the zipper pocket. He opened it, empty, slid the device inside, closed the zip, 3 seconds. His hands did not shake. He noted that his hands did not shake. Filed it away alongside the cold voice in Roger's office, a small catalog of the person he was becoming. Nora returned with her coffee. They talked. The conversation moved through the motions of 2 people who used to know each other and were now performing the memory of that knowledge. Then Nora reached across the table. Her fingers touched the back of his hand. Light, familiar. The same fingers that had passed him car keys, poured coffee, traced circles on his chest in bed. The touch arrived from a body he still recognized and a person he no longer did, and for one terrible, involuntary second, it felt like home. That was worse than revulsion. Revulsion was clean. This was contaminated tenderness, warmth from a source he could no longer trust.
I just want you to show that you still love me, to fight for me, even just a little.
Where's the part where you're fighting for our marriage, too?
When you're not working these ridiculous hours, that's when we can talk about it.
You really only care about what you want, don't you?
And you used to want to be with me.
He lied about still working night shifts. She believed him without question. And the ease of that, the frictionless acceptance of his deception, taught David something about their marriage that he hadn't considered. They'd both become comfortable with surface-level exchanges. She didn't interrogate his lie because she'd stopped looking for truth in his words. He didn't stumble in the telling because he'd stopped feeling obligated to be honest. The dishonesty was mutual. It had been growing between them for months like mold behind drywall, invisible, structural, eating the beams. After she left, he sat in the cafe for 10 minutes. He was relieved. He'd come here to pass a test. Could he lie directly to her face and feel nothing? He could. He did. He noted the nothing, filed it away with the steady hands and the cold voice. A growing collection. That evening, Camilla came to his house. She brought case files and the device's first recordings. They sat on the couch with Nora's indent still visible on the left cushion, and reviewed the materials. Then the professional architecture gave way, the way it always did when the files were closed and the coffee was gone, and there was nothing left to structure the silence.
How are you? Not the case. You.
I'm okay. Everything would be harder if you weren't here.
I'll always be here for you, David.
A pause. The pull between them, the one that had lived beneath 5 cases and 1,000 small moments of proximity, was closer to the surface now than it had ever been. David wanted to reach for her, to hold someone, to let another person's warmth overwrite the coldness that had been settling into him since the surveillance apartment. He didn't. Then Camilla set down her coffee. She looked at the wall, not at him, at the wall, with the expression of a person assembling words they'd been carrying all day.
Can I tell you something that's going to sound selfish?
Go ahead.
When I heard Nora's voice last night, on the mic with LaShawn, my first thought wasn't about you.
She paused, drew a breath.
My first thought was, now he'll be free.
The room held still.
And then I hated myself for thinking it, because your life was falling apart, and I was calculating what it meant for me. I've been carrying that around all day, and I need you to know it. Because if we're going to be anything, if this is going to be real, it can't start with me pretending I'm a better person than I am.
That doesn't make you a better
David looked at her. In a week of revelations, each one more devastating than the last, this was the first honest thing anyone had said to him that didn't draw blood.
That doesn't make you a bad person, Mila.
It doesn't make me a great one either.
Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you thought it.
Her eyes. The particular vulnerability of a woman who has just shown the ugliest corner of herself and is waiting to learn what it costs. David reached out and placed his hands on either side of her face. Her skin was warm. Her eyes were wide.
I'd love to be with you, more than you know, but right now, after everything, it wouldn't be fair to you. I need a little time.
I know, but promise me, when you're ready, tell me. Don't let anything get in the way.
I promise.
He leaned in and kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes at the contact. The way you close your eyes when something you've been waiting for finally arrives, and you want to hold it still for a moment before it becomes the past. 3 seconds. Then she opened her eyes, picked up her coffee, and they went back to the case files. The room was different now in a way that had nothing to do with surveillance or evidence or the mechanics of federal law enforcement. It was different the way a room is different when someone has told you the truth in it. The walls remember. Over the next 2 weeks, Camilla visited David's house every few days. Each visit delivered case intelligence. Each visit also delivered something harder to catalog. The slow accumulation of intimacy that happens not through grand gestures, but through repeated proximity, shared silence, and the particular bond that forms between two people who are both carrying something heavy and have stopped pretending they're not. The first visit fell on a Sunday. Camilla arrived with photos, financial records, and the facial recognition results that had been running since David left the case. She spread them across his coffee table, the same table where he and Nora used to eat pad thai on Friday nights, cross-legged on the floor, the TV on but unwatched.
15 women identified so far. 12 are small business owners or managers.
What kind of businesses?
Hair salons, nail bars, a small catering company, 2 boutique clothing stores, a yoga studio. The financial records show deposits averaging around $5,000, consistently under the $10,000 reporting threshold.
Somebody knows the rules.
Somebody definitely knows the rules.
While reviewing a stack of documents, Camilla's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face did something David hadn't seen before. A micro-flinch, corrected so quickly most people wouldn't have caught it. She put the phone away without answering.
Everything okay?
My mother. She calls every Sunday to ask when I'm bringing someone home to meet her. It's been 6 years of Sundays.
What do you tell her?
That I'm working on it. She stopped believing me around year 4.
They both laughed. It was small, barely more than an exhale with shape, but it was the first laughter the apartment had held since Nora moved out. The sound was foreign in the space, like hearing a piano in a room that had only known silence. Camilla picked up one of the financial documents, Nora and Alicia's business loan application.
You know what's actually impressive about your wife's drug operation?
I genuinely can't wait to hear this.
Her bookkeeping. Alicia kept a handwritten ledger. Names, amounts, dates, customer preferences. It's better organized than half the legitimate businesses I've investigated.
So you're telling me my wife's best friend would make a good accountant?
I'm saying if they'd put this much effort into the salon, they wouldn't have needed the side hustle.
I did.
David almost smiled. Almost. The muscles moved, the shape began, and then it stopped, like a door cracked open and then held. But Camilla saw it. She didn't push. She let the moment exist, imperfect and brief, and returned to the files. The second visit was Wednesday. Camilla brought the financial updates.
Nora's first payment came through. 5,000 to her business account. Alicia's been receiving the same amount every 2 weeks for 3 months.
Her business account, not personal?
Business.
Good. The salon loan is in her name, arguably marital debt. I need clean separation between my assets and anything tied to LaShawn's money.
You're already talking to lawyers.
Divorce lawyers? Yeah,
You're sure?
I'm sure.
She didn't push. But at the door, leaving, she paused.
David, take care of yourself, not just the case. You.
The third visit was a Monday. Camilla arrived carrying the weekend's device recordings and a look on her face that David had learned to read. I have something you need to hear, and you're not going to like it.
Nora was at LaShawn's again Saturday night. Just her and one other woman.
All 3 guys?
Yes.
David received this with a nod. A question about the financial trail. The emotional flatline that Camilla had been watching develop over the past 2 weeks. Each update adding another layer of callous, each revelation numbing him further. But tonight, before the case update, she had something else.
I want to play you a recording. Not from LaShawn's house. From the salon.
She took out her phone, pressed play. The audio was muffled. The device was inside Nora's bag, the bag on a counter. But the voices were clear enough. 2 women, end of the workday, chairs being pushed under stations, products being shelved. Alicia's voice first, talking logistics. The next meetup, a new potential client for the roster. Business. Then Nora.
Do you ever think about what we're doing? Like, actually think about it?
What do you mean?
I mean, David's a federal agent. If he finds out...
He's not going to find out. He didn't even know you moved out for a whole day. The man doesn't notice anything.
A pause on the recording, long enough to hear the ambient hum of the salon's ventilation system.
He noticed eventually.
Yeah, after you called him.
Then Nora's voice changed, dropped. The voice of a person who has stepped outside the script and is, for one unguarded moment, looking at her own life from a distance.
Sometimes I wake up at your place at like 3 a.m. and I reach for him. My hand goes to his side of the bed, and he's not there. And I remember he's at work. And then I remember that I'm not at home. And I don't know which part makes me sadder. That he's not there, or that I chose to not be there either.
Nora.
No, I know. I know what I said. I know what we're doing. I didn't think it would feel like this. I thought I'd feel free. I thought having money and having LaShawn, I thought it would feel like something. But it doesn't feel like anything. It's just more of the same empty, except now I can't even pretend I'm the good one.
A long silence on the recording. Then Alicia, softer.
It's too late to go back. You know that.
I know.
A few more months. We'll have enough. You divorce David, take your half, pay off the loan, start over.
And David?
What about David?
I was going to divorce him anyway, but I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want there to be all this.
He'll never know about any of it. Nobody gets hurt.
Another pause. Then Nora's voice, barely above the threshold of the microphone.
Somebody's already hurt.
The recording ended. David stared at Camilla's phone on the coffee table. The silence in his living room had a weight to it, as if the air itself had thickened. This changed nothing. Not legally, not strategically. The case would proceed. The divorce would proceed. The arrests would come. But the recording changed something behind the wall David had been constructing. The wall between himself and the woman he'd married. Because the Nora on that recording was not the Nora who'd told LaShawn, not even close. She wasn't the Nora who'd laughed about the wedding ring. She was the Nora who reached for him at 3 a.m. in a bed that wasn't theirs. The Nora who said, "I didn't think it would feel like this." The Nora who used to leave coffee mugs with the handle facing right. That woman was still in there, under the decisions, under the drugs, under the distance. and she was miserable. David's hand went to his face, covered his eyes. One moment. Camilla sat beside him, close, not touching, giving him the space to feel whatever this was.
She was going to divorce me anyway.
Yes,
She said somebody's already hurt.
she did.
I don't know what to do with that.
You don't have to do anything with it. Not tonight.
David dropped his hand, looked at Camilla. His eyes were dry. The tears remained behind a door he'd sealed shut. But something in his face had shifted. A fissure in the wall, not enough to collapse it, enough to let air through.
Let's look at the financials.
They worked for another hour. The case proceeded. The recording sat in the room like a third person who wouldn't leave. Later at the door, Camilla leaving, case files in her bag, everything professional concluded. The moment arrived the way real moments do, without announcement. She was starting to say, "I'll see you in a few days," when David leaned in and kissed her. On the mouth, briefly, deliberately. Not passion, declaration. A statement made with the lips because the vocabulary of the spoken word was insufficient. He pulled back. Not because he wanted to stop, because she deserved to be the beginning of something, not the end of something else.
When you're ready.
Still patient. But her voice carried a vibration that hadn't been there before. The frequency of a woman who has been waiting and has just received the first evidence that the wait is finite.
Soon, Mila, I promise.
She left. He closed the door, stood in the hallway of his own house, alone, at 10 p.m. on a Monday night. The indent in the couch cushion was still shaped like Nora. The shampoo was still in the bathroom cabinet, the kitchen drawer still stuck. But the door he'd just closed, the front door, the one Camilla had walked through 3 times now, that door was beginning to feel like it belonged to a different house, not the house he'd shared with Nora, a house that didn't exist yet, a starting point. He went to the kitchen, made coffee, set the mug on the counter. The handle faced right. He stared at it for a moment, then drank his coffee standing up, because sitting at the table alone still felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. The knock was different, harder, faster. The knock of a person who has been holding something in for the length of a car ride and can't hold it for the length of a hallway. David opened the door. Camilla stood there with her bag over one shoulder and a look on her face he'd seen exactly once before. In the debrief room after the informant case, when she'd figured out why the informant had flipped before anyone else did. The look of a mind that had found the last piece and was vibrating with the effort of not shouting it.
We've got them.
Wait, you were supposed to tell me before.
We haven't arrested anyone yet. That's why I'm here. You need to have Nora served. Today. Right now.
She was inside before the door was fully open. Bag on the couch, phone out, talking as she moved, her hands punctuating the words the way they did when the professional composure gave way to the person underneath. The break had come from the device on Nora, not from LaShawn's house, from the salon.
Yesterday afternoon, closing up, Nora and Alicia were discussing which clients to add to their roster. Nora mentioned that someone named Tracy would need to stop by more often for her nails if they expanded.
Tracy?
Tracy Marshall, Vernon Robinson's girlfriend. She gets her nails done at salons all over LA County. We checked. She has standing appointments at nearly every business we've connected to LaShawn's network.
She's the courier.
We got sniffer dogs on her car while she was at one of her appointments. Positive hit. Multiple wrapped bags of cocaine and amphetamines in the vehicle. We photographed everything, put it all back, then followed her to her next 3 stops. Video evidence of every delivery.
And the link back to LaShawn?
Vernon was filmed arriving at Tracy's apartment with a gym bag, left without it. Product goes from LaShawn's house, to Vernon, to Tracy, to the women's businesses. The entire chain documented.
The elegance of it. David could see the whole operation now, the architecture that had been invisible for weeks, hidden behind the one thing they'd dismissed. TJ recruited the women through the clubs, maintaining the relationships through sexual encounters that disguised the business arrangement as recreation. Tracy delivered the product through beauty appointments, the most unremarkable cover imaginable, a woman getting her nails done. The women sold to their client networks. The money returned in deposits carefully calibrated below reporting thresholds. And LaShawn never left his house, never made a traceable call, never touched the product after it crossed his threshold. It was, from a purely criminal perspective, brilliant. And it had been undone by David's wife mentioning a name in her own salon while a government listening device sat in her handbag 3 feet away.
When are you executing?
Tomorrow morning, coordinated. All locations simultaneously.
Tomorrow morning.
Which means your divorce papers need to be filed and served before she's in custody.
David called his lawyer, explained the urgency in terms that omitted the classified details and emphasized only the timeline. The papers needed to reach Alicia's apartment within the hour. His lawyer, a man whose professional life consisted of other people's emergencies delivered at inconvenient times, said he'd handle it. With the call made and the legal machinery engaged, David and Camilla found themselves in his living room with nothing left to plan. For weeks, their time together had been structured by files and financials and the mechanical rhythm of an active investigation. Without that scaffolding, the silence revealed what had been underneath the whole time.
I could just kiss you.
She meant the case, the breakthrough, the device, but the words landed in both registers and neither of them pretended otherwise.
How about dinner tonight, after all of this is done?
After all of this is done.
And then?
And then whatever comes next.
That evening, after Camilla left to prepare for the morning's operation, David's phone began to vibrate. Nora, text after text. Why are you divorcing me? We agreed to talk when your shifts were over. David, call me back, please. He read each one. The irony was a specific physical sensation, like swallowing something too hot. She was asking why her husband was divorcing her while sitting in the apartment she shared with her partner in a drug distribution network hours before federal agents would execute warrants for her arrest. The cognitive distance required to type those words, to feel genuinely wronged, genuinely confused, was either staggering or entirely human. Maybe both. People are capable of extraordinary compartmentalization when the truth is too expensive to acknowledge. David turned off his phone, went to bed early, lay in the dark with his eyes open. At 3 a.m., because 3 a.m. had become the hour when the sealed doors opened whether he wanted them to or not. He got up, walked through the house, the kitchen drawer, still stuck, still not fixed. She'd stopped asking about it months ago, and he'd interpreted her silence as acceptance. Maybe it was. Maybe it was something else. The quiet recalibration of a woman lowering her expectations by one small increment, and then another, until the distance between what she wanted and what she got was so vast that she stopped measuring it. The couch, her side, the cushion still holding the shape of her body like a cast of someone who'd left. The bathroom. He opened the cabinet for toothpaste, and her shampoo was there. Coconut and something floral, the scent that had lived on the pillow beside him for 2 years. It hit him before he could close the door. Not a memory, exactly. A sensory ambush. The olfactory system is the only sense that bypasses the thalamus and feeds directly into the limbic brain, which means smell reaches emotion before cognition can intervene. He closed the cabinet, sat on the edge of the bed. 5 minutes. He allowed himself 5 minutes of sitting with the full weight of what had happened and what would happen in a few hours. 5 minutes of the woman who said, "We did it." The woman who ran the bath. The woman on the recording who said, "Somebody's already hurt." 5 minutes. Then he stood, closed the door, got back into bed. Morning came the way it always came, without permission, without readiness, on its own schedule. At 9:15 a.m., David Smith was sitting in an apartment in Reseda that smelled like lavender air freshener and cat, listening to a 73-year-old woman named Mrs. Gutierrez describe her hip replacement surgery in detail that would have impressed a medical textbook.
The doctor said it was the worst hip he'd seen in 30 years. 30 years. I told him, "You should see my other one."
Yes, ma'am. Now about your tenant in 4B.
Oh, that man. Let me get you some coffee first. You look like you need coffee.
She handed him a mug. World's Best Grandma, in faded gold lettering. The coffee was instant, the kind that tasted like someone had described coffee to a chemical engineer over a bad phone connection. David drank it and said, "Thank you," because that was what you did. And because the mundane mechanics of federal law enforcement, the forms, the questions, the instant coffee and novelty mugs, were today the only things keeping him from checking his phone every 30 seconds. Every few minutes his hand went to his pocket. The phone was there, silent, waiting, somewhere in Los Angeles. He didn't know exactly where, couldn't know, had been explicitly removed from knowing. Camilla was executing coordinated raids across the county. He'd been imagining the choreography since dawn. The pre-dawn staging in parking lots, agents in body armor running entry protocols, the synchronized strikes designed to hit every target within a 30-minute window so that no one could warn anyone else. The women's businesses first. Salon doors opening at 6 a.m. to find federal badges where the first clients should have been. Tracy Marshall intercepted mid-morning during her delivery rounds, the product still in her vehicle. And then the main event, LaShawn's house. The same front door where TJ used to knock, where women waited under the porch light to be let in, now meeting a battering ram instead of a deadbolt. David knew none of this was happening yet, or had already happened, or was happening right now. He sat in Mrs. Gutierrez's living room with a cat winding between his ankles and a mug of terrible coffee and tried to focus on a tenant in apartment 4B who was almost certainly irrelevant to anything that mattered today.
He was a quiet man, paid on time. I never thought he was into anything like that.
They usually don't advertise it, ma'am.
Would you like more coffee?
No, thank you.
At 12:07 p.m., standing in the hallway outside Mrs. Gutierrez's apartment, having extracted himself with the particular combination of politeness and urgency that is a core skill of federal fieldwork, his phone rang. Camilla.
Everything went off without a problem.
He leaned against the hallway wall, closed his eyes. Let the words settle.
21 women arrested across the county. Tracy Marshall caught with physical evidence in her vehicle. LaShawn, TJ, and Vernon in custody. 4 firearms recovered. Roderick is already running them to the FBI lab.
Nora?
10 ounces on site in a lockbox. Over 20,000 in cash. And Alicia's ledger. The one I told you about. The meticulous one.
Were you there to arrest her?
No, I was at LaShawn's. Agent Riley handled the salon.
The small mercy of that, of Camilla not being the one to put handcuffs on her colleague's wife, sat between them unspoken. Some kindnesses don't need to be acknowledged. They just need to exist. A pause in the debrief. Then,
You want to know the strangest part of the whole morning?
What?
When we entered LaShawn's place, Vernon was in the kitchen making a protein shake. Full-size blender, spinach, banana, protein powder. The works. Federal agents with weapons drawn are pouring through his front door, and this man is blending a smoothie. He looked at us, looked at the blender and said, "I swear to God, can I at least finish this? I just bought the bananas."
David laughed. An actual laugh. Short, involuntary, erupting from somewhere beneath the rubble of the last 3 weeks. It sounded foreign in his own mouth, like a word from a language he used to be fluent in and had forgotten he spoke.
What did you say?
I said, "No, Vernon, you cannot finish your smoothie." And then I arrested him. He was genuinely upset about the bananas.
David was still smiling when they hung up. The expression felt strange on his face, the muscles activating after a period of disuse, like testing a light switch in a room that's been dark. The second call came that afternoon, a number he recognized but hadn't seen in weeks, Nora's parents. He answered. Her mother was crying, the specific hitching sound of a woman who had been crying for hours and had exhausted the dramatic registers and was now operating in the mechanical mode that sustained grief eventually settles into. Her father was silent on the extension, the silence of a man from a generation that believed emotional control was a structural requirement of masculinity, even when the structure was on fire. They wanted to know what happened. They wanted to know if David could help. They wanted to know if their daughter was going to be okay. David's position, he had bugged their daughter. He had provided the financial records that built the case against her. He had proposed the strategy that led to her arrest. And they had called him because he was family, because he was, technically, still their son-in-law, expecting him to be on their side of the plexiglass.
I'm sorry. I know this is devastating. I wish I could tell you more.
He said very little else. He promised nothing. He said, "I'm sorry," and the words contained more meanings than Nora's parents could possibly decode. Sorrow for their daughter, guilt for his role, grief for the family he'd once belonged to, and underneath it all, the cold acknowledgement that he would do it again. Every step, every decision, every word. He hung up, stared at the wall of Mrs. Gutierrez's apartment building. Beige stucco, sun-bleached, indifferent. That chapter of my life is now over. Time to start the next one. He almost believed it. Almost. But chapters don't end at the period. They bleed into the next paragraph, carrying their ink. 8 p.m. A restaurant on Melrose that neither of them had been to before, chosen deliberately. Neutral ground, no ghosts, no booth where they'd sat with other people in other lives. Just a place with good lighting and a menu and the faint background percussion of other people's conversations, which is the sound of normalcy, which is the sound David hadn't heard in weeks. He picked Camilla up at her apartment. When she opened the door, the breath went out of him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He'd seen her in surveillance room fluorescence, the flat, shadowless white that made everyone look like evidence photos. He'd seen her in his living room lamplight, warm but constrained, domestic. This was different. A black dress, her dark hair down and loose, falling past her shoulders. Candlelight from behind her, where she'd left a candle burning on the hallway table, catching the gold of her mother's crucifix. She looked like the same person, seen for the first time without obstruction.
You're staring.
Yeah, I am.
At the restaurant, real food. The specific, almost spiritual pleasure of sitting across from another human being in a room that smelled like garlic and fresh bread instead of microwave popcorn and institutional carpet. They ordered. Wine, Camilla chose, because David's wine knowledge consisted entirely of red and white, and the honest admission that he couldn't tell the difference after the second glass. They talked about the case, inevitably because the case was the river they'd both been swimming in, and you don't climb out of a river without mentioning the water, but also about other things. The academy. The first time they'd met, a training exercise where David had accidentally discharged a paint round into an instructor's coffee, and Camilla had laughed so hard she'd failed the exercise too. The cases before this one. The future, which neither of them had spoken about directly until tonight.
What did Nora say during processing?
Camilla set down her wine glass. She'd been waiting for this question, had probably rehearsed her answer on the drive over, calibrating how much to share and how to share it.
I didn't interview her myself. Agent Riley handled it.
And?
The chain was Jane Thompson first. She'd been in LaShawn's network for over a year, distributing through her entertainment industry contacts. When Alicia started struggling with the loan payments, Jane offered to connect her. Alicia joined 3 months ago. Then Alicia brought Nora in.
But Nora didn't need the money. We were managing.
She was planning to leave you, David. She wanted enough to cover both the mortgage and the business loan on her own. She was building an exit fund.
David picked up his fork, put it down, picked up his wine, put that down too. His hands wanted something to hold, but nothing on the table was the right shape. The hurt was architecturally different from the sexual betrayal. That had been a wrecking ball, sudden, explosive, the kind of damage you could see from the street. This was subsidence, the slow, sickening discovery that the ground you'd been standing on had been hollow the whole time, and that the person standing next to you had known it was hollow and had been quietly moving her valuables to higher ground while you stood there trusting the floor. While he'd been working late nights to provide, she'd been accumulating the resources to leave him. While he'd been worrying about saving the marriage, she'd been calculating the cost of ending it. They'd both been working toward the family's financial stability. They'd just been operating under different definitions of family.
How long had she been planning it?
The deposit started 3 months ago. But based on what she told Riley, she'd been thinking about leaving since before she moved out.
The timeline. It rewrote everything, retroactively, the way Nora's Not Even Close had rewritten their sexual history. The late-night texts, not desperate pleas from a lonely wife, but the strategic pressure of a woman testing whether her husband would give her a reason to stay. The anger about his hours, not irrational frustration, but the carefully maintained grievance of someone who needed justification for a decision already made. The move to Alicia's apartment, not impulsive but staged, and this was the thought David couldn't fully suppress, the thought planted by the salon recording, by Nora's voice at 3 a.m. reaching for a body that wasn't there. Maybe they were both. Maybe she was simultaneously lonely and calculating. Maybe she wanted him to fight for her and was planning to leave if he didn't. Maybe the human heart was large enough and contradictory enough to pursue two incompatible desires with equal sincerity. He decided it didn't matter. Not tonight. Tonight, the woman across from him had warm eyes and a black dress and had been waiting for this dinner for longer than either of them had admitted.
I'm done talking about Nora.
Good.
Tell me about the time you accidentally handcuffed yourself to a filing cabinet during the academy.
That never happened.
Clifford told me it happened.
Clifford is a liar, and I will arrest him.
She was laughing. He was laughing. It wasn't the laughter of people who have resolved something. It was the laughter of people who have agreed, for one evening, to set the weight down. The weight would still be there in the morning. It would be there for months. But tonight the table held wine and bread and two people who had earned the right to a few hours of not carrying anything. They went to Camilla's apartment afterward. The before, the specific nervous energy of two people who had wanted each other for years and were now standing in the same room without a single professional reason to maintain distance. Camilla's hands trembled slightly as she poured wine. She noticed, laughed at herself. And the laugh broke something open the way laughter does when it arrives at the exact moment that tension becomes unbearable. David couldn't hold eye contact for more than 3 seconds, which was absurd for a man trained in interrogation techniques, but interrogation rooms were easier because the stakes were professional, and professional stakes didn't make your stomach feel like the floor had disappeared. The after David in Camilla's bed, the early hours, her head on his chest, his arm around her, listening to her breathe. The quality of this quiet was specific. It was not the surveillance apartment quiet, charged, professional, thick with things unsaid. It was not the empty house quiet, the silence of absence, of rooms that held the shape of someone who'd left. This quiet had warmth. This quiet had a heartbeat. This quiet contained another person, asleep and trusting, and the trust was the thing that undid him most. The casual animal trust of a body choosing to be vulnerable beside his. For the first time in months, the space next to him was occupied. He left before dawn. Drove east through Los Angeles with the windows down and the sky doing that thing it did in the minutes before full sunrise. Pink and gray and a gold that lasted exactly 20 minutes before the sun climbed high enough to wash it out. He noticed the light. He hadn't been noticing light or weather or the color of anything for weeks. The noticing felt like the first green thing pushing through ash. He was thinking about coffee, about Camilla's kitchen, which he'd only seen briefly, and whether she had a favorite mug, and whether the handle faced a particular direction. He couldn't wait to find out. Months passed, the way months do after the kind of event that divides time into before and after, not smoothly, not at a consistent speed, but in lurches and plateaus, some weeks crawling and others vanishing entirely, the calendar pages turning at a rhythm that had nothing to do with the clock and everything to do with the specific gravity of grief and recovery and the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding a life. The legal proceedings moved through the federal system with their own institutional patience. Nora received 18 months with 2 years probation. She lost the salon, the business she and Alicia had built from their former boss's retirement sale, the dream she'd called David about from the bank parking lot with shaking hands and the word, "we." Her savings, modest to begin with, were consumed by legal fees. She would receive half the house proceeds after the bank extracted what remained on the mortgage, a sum that, after the math was done, would fit comfortably into a checking account, and not much else. Alicia received a similar sentence. Her meticulous ledger, the one Camilla had joked was better organized than most legitimate businesses, became the prosecution's primary exhibit. The very skill that might have made her successful in a legal career was the instrument of her conviction. Irony didn't care about fairness. Jane Thompson, whose connections to LaShawn's network ran deeper and wider through the entertainment industry, received a longer sentence. LaShawn Johnson, Tyson Jones, and Vernon Robinson faced federal charges that extended well beyond drug distribution. The 4 firearms recovered from the residence matched ballistics from 3 related homicides the FBI had been investigating. Agent Rodgick's persistent, meticulous work, the quiet competence David had watched from across a desk for weeks, connected the guns to the killings. The conspiracy charges alone would keep all 3 men incarcerated for decades. The FBI case that had piggybacked on the DEA's surveillance operation became one of the largest prosecutions in the district that year. David's professional aftermath was quieter. Roger Withers ensured that the conceptual breakthrough, the theory about the women, the decision to bug Nora, the financial architecture that David had mapped before removing himself, was credited in the case file. Camilla received the operational commendation for executing the arrests. David felt no jealousy. What he felt instead surprised him with its warmth, pride. Simple, uncomplicated pride in someone he cared about being recognized for excellent work. It was, he realized, the first uncomplicated emotion he'd had in months. They formalized their relationship. Roger was informed, not asked for permission, because agency policy didn't require permission, only disclosure. The necessary reassignment followed. David and Camilla would no longer work the same cases. David accepted his new role, lead work, driving between interviews, taking notes, the solitary field work of a man with a car and a notepad, with something that approached contentment, the simplicity of it. The hours alone with his own thoughts, driving Los Angeles freeways between appointments, the radio on, the window down. After months of headphones and secrets and listening to other people's lives through walls, the silence of a car moving through open space felt less like loneliness and more like breathing room. It was a Tuesday afternoon when David drove to the women's correctional facility. He passed through security, the specific procedural indignity of a federal law enforcement agent submitting to the same screening as every other visitor. Badge meaningless on this side of the door. Belt off, pockets emptied. The metal detectors arch like a threshold between 2 versions of the world. The visiting room. Fluorescent lights. The same institutional frequency that made everyone look slightly ill, slightly guilty, regardless of which side of the plexiglass they sat on. Phone receivers mounted on the divider walls, their plastic surfaces carrying the accumulated residue of 1,000 conversations conducted through institutional equipment. Rows of booths, each one a small theater of consequence. On one side, the people who were free, on the other, the people who weren't. David sat, picked up the receiver, waited. Nora appeared from the corridor, orange jumpsuit, no makeup. Her auburn hair pulled back without attention to style. Functional, the way hair looks when appearance has become irrelevant to survival. She looked smaller. Maybe the jumpsuit did that, the way it erased the body's individual shape and replaced it with institutional geometry. Maybe the room did it. Maybe people physically contracted when the world they'd constructed around themselves was taken away. She sat, picked up her phone. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They looked at each other through the plexiglass, a material engineered to permit sight while preventing contact, which was, David thought, a precise description of everything they'd been doing for the last year of their marriage.
Why did you do it? You knew I was a DEA agent. You knew what you were getting into.
Alicia promised it would solve everything. The money, the loneliness. She said LaShawn was careful, that nobody would ever find out.
You were selling drugs through your business. My name is associated with that business.
I wasn't thinking about your career.
What were you thinking about?
Me. I was thinking about how I spent every night alone in a house that felt like a waiting room. How my best friend was making money and meeting people and living her life while I sat on the couch watching the clock.
So you fucked LaShawn Johnson, and TJ, and Vernon. That was your solution.
Nora's jaw tightened. The defiance arrived, the same defiance he'd heard in her voice on the phone from the club that Friday night. The same defiance that had been her armor since the moment everything started falling.
Was it worth it?
It was while it lasted.
The words landed. David absorbed them the way his body had learned to absorb impacts over the past few months. Not by resisting, but by letting them pass through, the way a wave passes through water. The water doesn't break, it just moves. He was about to hang up. The conversation had reached its natural end, the point where further words would only deepen wounds that were already as deep as they needed to be. But then something in Nora's face shifted. The defiance fractured, not dramatically, not the cinematic collapse of a woman breaking down in a prison visiting room. Something smaller. Her hand moved to the glass, not pressing against it, not the performative palm-on-plexiglass gesture of a movie. Just resting there, fingers open, as if reaching for something that the material between them wouldn't permit. Her voice dropped, quieter. The register David recognized from the salon recording, the voice that existed underneath the performance, underneath the defiance, underneath all the choices that had brought her to this side of the glass.
I don't know when I stopped loving you. I keep trying to find the exact moment, and I can't. It was like the lights just dimmed, slowly, and by the time I noticed, I was already in the dark.
David held the phone. The fluorescent tube above him flickered. The same dying rhythm from the opening, the one that pulsed fast enough to notice and slow enough that you couldn't stop counting.
I think the lights dimmed for both of us.
A pause. Then, because it was true, and because he might never say it again, and because some truths can only be spoken through plexiglass where the distance makes honesty possible.
I'm sorry I wasn't home more.
Nora's eyes. Something moved behind them. Not a single emotion, but a collision of several. Gratitude, maybe. Grief. The specific lacerating pain of hearing the words you needed to hear arriving 2 years after they could have changed anything.
I'm sorry for everything, Dave.
He nodded, hung up the phone. The receiver clicked against the mount with a small final sound. He watched her stand, the guard's hand on her arm, procedural, impersonal, the touch of someone performing a function. She walked down the corridor, smaller with each step, or maybe the corridor was long, or maybe both. She didn't look back. David sat in the booth for a full minute after she disappeared. The plexiglass still held the fading oval of condensation where her palm had rested, a ghost of warmth on cold glass, shrinking as he watched, contracting like a pupil adjusting to new light. He watched until the glass was clean, until there was no evidence she'd been there at all. Then he stood, walked through the visiting room, past the other booths with their other tragedies, through the security checkpoint where his belt and phone were returned to him, through the lobby that smelled like floor polish and vending machine coffee, and out through the front doors. Dr. Mind Commentary Number 2. What you just witnessed was not closure. Closure is a concept invented by people who have never been through anything that required it. It's a word therapists use on intake forms, and a promise self-help books make on their covers, and a destination that does not appear on any honest map of human grief. What you witnessed was something less satisfying and more real. Two people sitting in the rubble of a shared life and acknowledging for the first time that both of them had been holding matches. Nora's metaphor. The lights just dimmed. In 40 years of studying marriages at the University of Washington's Love Lab, Dr. John Gottman identified a phenomenon he called negative sentiment override. In healthy relationships, partners give each other the benefit of the doubt. A late arrival is traffic, a forgotten errand is distraction, a short temper is a bad day. In deteriorating relationships, the same behaviors are interpreted as evidence of indifference, selfishness, or contempt. The transition between these two states is so gradual that it mimics normalcy. The lights don't go out. They dim, and you adjust your eyes to each successive level of darkness until the room you're standing in doesn't look dark anymore, It just looks like the room. That's what Nora described. It wasn't a choice. It was an erosion. Her defiance, it was worth it while it lasted, is a different mechanism entirely. In 1957, Dr. Leon Festinger at Stanford published his theory of cognitive dissonance, which describes the psychological distress humans experience when their actions contradict their beliefs. The mind resolves this distress not by changing the behavior, that's already done, but by revising the belief to match the behavior. Nora may not believe it was worth it, but the alternative is accepting that she destroyed her marriage, her business, her freedom, and her relationship with her parents for a feeling that lasted a few months and left nothing behind. The human mind will construct any narrative, adopt any posture, perform any act of self-deception to avoid that specific reckoning. And then David spoke. 6 words. "I'm sorry I wasn't home more." Those 6 words are the most important moment in this story. More important than the discovery at the monitors, more important than the arrest, more important than the case or the commendation or the dinner with Camilla or anything that happens after. Because those words mean David is holding both truths. He was wronged, profoundly. His wife sold drugs through a business associated with his name, slept with the subjects of a federal investigation, and planned to divorce him using the proceeds. No context mitigates that. No amount of loneliness or frustration or slowly dimming lights excuses the decision to sell cocaine or the decision to have sex with 3 drug dealers while married to a federal agent. And he was absent. He came home too tired. He answered the logistics of her questions, but not the emotions behind them. He chose the case over the marriage so many times that the choice became invisible. Not a decision, but a default setting, like the handle on a coffee mug. Automatic, unexamined. Most people in his position select one truth and discard the other. It was all her fault, and they calcify into bitterness. Or it was all my fault, and they collapse into self-blame. Both paths are simpler. Both are wrong. Both are lies that fit neatly into the space where a complicated truth should be. David is doing the harder thing. He is holding both truths in the same hand, feeling their opposite weights, refusing to put either one down. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, who lost his wife, his parents, and his brother in the camps, and who still managed to articulate something useful about human suffering, wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our freedom and our power to choose our response." David has found the space. He's standing in it right now, in a prison parking lot, blinking against the sunlight. What he builds in that space, what kind of man he becomes inside it, will determine everything that follows. The hand on the glass, the condensation fading. Some things leave marks only briefly. That doesn't mean they weren't there. The air outside the prison was different. Not better. Different. Cleaner, maybe, the way air tastes when you've been breathing the recycled version for an hour. It carried the smell of grass from the median strip, asphalt softening in the afternoon warmth, and something harder to name that David realized was simply the absence of institutional sadness. Prisons have an atmosphere. It clings to your clothes like cigarette smoke. You don't notice it until you're outside, and the wind takes it. Camilla was leaning against the driver's side of the car, not inside it, outside, arms crossed, sunglasses pushed up into her dark hair. She was wearing a weekend dress, light blue, something he hadn't seen before. She looked like she belonged to a different day than the one he was leaving. She didn't ask how it went. She could read the answer on his face, the same way she'd read surveillance monitors for 5 joint operations, the same way she'd read his hand going white on a desk, the same way she'd read a room and known when to slide a coffee cup 3 inches to the left without explanation.
Mountains.
Mountains.
Camilla drove. David leaned his head against the passenger window and watched Los Angeles thin. The density of the city gave way in stages. First the buildings lowered, then the billboards spaced farther apart, then the vegetation shifted from landscape to wild, and the air through the cracked window changed temperature as elevation increased. The city released them in increments, the way a fist unclenches. Not all at once, but finger by finger. They talked. Not about the case. Not about Nora. Not about the prison or the plexiglass or the 6 words David had said that he hadn't planned to say.
What's this place described as again?
Rustic romantic.
Which means?
No cell service and a shower that was probably installed during the Nixon administration.
Are bears a concern?
Statistically, you're more likely to be struck by lightning.
That's not the reassurance you think it is.
Somewhere around mile 70, the conversation went quiet. Not the uncomfortable quiet of people who have run out of things to say. The specific quiet of two people who are thinking about the same thing and deciding whether to name it. Camilla named it.
During the surveillance, the worst nights, when we were listening to Nora at Le Champs, I went home afterward and cried.
David turned his head from the window.
Not for you, I mean, yes, for you. But also for me, because I was watching you break, in real time. And the only thing I was allowed to do was hold your hand and stay professional. I went home and sat on my bathroom floor and cried because I couldn't do more than that.
David reached across the console and put his hand on her knee.
You did more than enough, Mila. You did everything.
I know, but I need you to know it wasn't easy for me either. People keep asking how you're doing. Nobody asks the person who was sitting next to you in the room.
I'm asking now.
I'm okay. Better than okay. But I'm carrying some of it too. And if this is real, if we're doing this, I don't want there to be parts of me you can't see.
David squeezed her knee. The road unwound. The mountains grew larger against the windshield, their details sharpening as the distance closed. Individual trees becoming visible, then individual rocks, then the texture of the slopes themselves, the geology of something ancient and indifferent to human drama. The lodge was small. A cabin, really. Wood shingled, with a porch that overlooked a valley and a wood-burning stove that smelled like every fire that had ever been burned in it. The listing had promised rustic romantic. It delivered on both counts, although rustic was doing more work than romantic in the areas of plumbing and insulation. David unpacked his overnight bag. He'd brought almost nothing, a clean shirt, a toothbrush, a phone charger, and at the bottom, where it had settled during the drive, Nora's wedding ring, the one he'd removed from his own hand 3 weeks ago. He hadn't decided what to do with it. He'd been carrying it in his bag the way you carry an object you're not ready to keep and not ready to discard, in transit, in limbo, in the specific purgatory of things that no longer belong to you but haven't yet been reassigned. He set it on the nightstand, not deliberately, the automatic gesture of emptying pockets and bags. It sat there in the late afternoon light from the window, a small gold circle, catching the sun, full of everything and meaning nothing. Camilla saw it. She didn't mention it. This was becoming one of the things David loved about her. She understood that some objects in a room were not invitations to conversation. They were simply objects, present, unresolved, allowed to exist without commentary. They didn't see much of the scenery that weekend. What they did see, the valley at dusk, the stars that appeared in a density impossible in Los Angeles, the fog that filled the valley at dawn like a secret the earth was keeping, they saw from the porch, in the minutes between other activities, wrapped in blankets that smelled like wood smoke and the particular mustiness of a cabin that spent most of its life unoccupied. What the novel shows of that weekend is not the romance. It's the peace. The specific, hard-won peace of two people who have been through something terrible together and have arrived at a place where the terrible thing is behind them, and the uncertain thing is ahead, and the present moment, this porch, this blanket, this person beside you, is enough. Not resolved, not healed, but enough. Sunday morning. David woke early. Camilla was still sleeping. Her arm was extended across the bed to where his body had been, her fingers loosely curled around the sheet she'd grabbed in his absence. The unconscious reach of a body that had already learned to expect his presence and was registering, even in sleep, the discrepancy. He stood at the window. The mountains. The valley below, filled with morning fog that would burn off by 10, but currently looked like the world had pulled a white blanket over itself and wasn't ready to get up. He thought about Nora, not with anger, not with love, with the specific neutral attention of a man reviewing a completed file. He thought about the salon, the coffee mug, the bath, the bank parking lot, the recording. Somebody's already hurt. The plexiglass. The condensation fading from the glass. He thought about the question he would carry without answering for the rest of his life. If I had come home earlier, that one night, the night she wanted to talk, the night she stood in the kitchen with 2 wine glasses and I walked past her to bed, would any of this be different? He didn't know. He was learning to live inside the not knowing. It turned out that the not knowing had rooms. Some were uncomfortable, some were almost peaceful. The one he was standing in now, this room, this window, this morning, was tolerable. Maybe even good. The fog in the valley, the woman behind him, the quiet. Camilla stirred, opened her eyes, saw him standing at the window in his boxers with his arms crossed, backlit by mountain light.
Hey.
Hey.
That was all. 2 people in a room. Morning light coming in. Mountains outside doing what mountains did, existing at a scale that made human problems the size they actually were, which was small, not unimportant, just small. David walked back to the bed, sat on the edge. Camilla's hand found his, the same hand that had found his in a surveillance apartment on the worst night of his life. The same gesture, different room, different weight. The hand that had been first aid was becoming something else. Something that didn't have a clinical name because it didn't need one. It was just a hand, warm, present, choosing to be there. He didn't know if this would last. He didn't know if the damage Nora had left would surface in ways he couldn't predict. Jealousy triggered by a late arrival, coldness activated by an unanswered phone, the reflexive flinch when someone said, "I love you," and he braced for the but. He didn't know. But her hand was warm, and the morning was clear, and the fog was lifting. For right now, that was enough. The house sold in April. It took 11 days on the market, faster than the realtor predicted, slower than David wanted. A young couple bought it, late 20s, recently engaged, the woman already talking about which room would be the nursery. David signed the paperwork at his lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon and didn't drive past the house afterward. Some buildings you leave by walking away. Others you leave by not looking back. The split was clean. David's lawyer had ensured that his half was insulated from criminal forfeiture proceedings. The divorce filed before the arrest, the finances separated before the seizure orders came down. The precision of that timing was something David took no pride in. It had been necessary and calculated and cold, and the fact that he'd been capable of that coldness while his marriage was being autopsied was a data point about himself that he filed away without examination. Some files you don't open twice. His portion of the proceeds went toward a deposit on a place closer to the office. 1 bedroom, a galley kitchen where 2 people could cook if they coordinated elbows. A window that faced a jacaranda tree. One of those Los Angeles trees that exploded into purple every spring with an extravagance that seemed almost irresponsible, like a quiet person suddenly showing up to a party in a sequined jacket. Progress, David decided, could be measured in the quality of what you saw when you looked outside. Nora's parents learned the full truth through the legal proceedings. Court documents are not designed for nuance. They render human catastrophe in the flat, declarative language of charges and evidence and sentencing recommendations. And what gets lost in that translation is everything that matters. Nora's mother and father read those documents and understood that their son-in-law had helped build the case against their daughter, and they stopped calling. David didn't blame them. He thought about calling them himself sometimes, to explain, to contextualize, to offer the version of events that included the bath and the coffee mug and the woman who said, "We did it," from a bank parking lot. He didn't call. Some explanations only add damage to the thing they're trying to repair. Alicia's sentence matched Nora's. 18 months, 2 years probation. Her handwritten ledger, the one Camilla had admired for its organizational rigor, was entered as Exhibit A and reproduced in the prosecution's brief with the clinical annotation, "Defendant's Distribution Records." The irony of a woman's greatest professional skill being the instrument of her conviction was not noted in the brief. Irony doesn't have a docket number. Jane Thompson received a longer sentence. Her connections to LaShawn's network ran deeper, her distribution volume higher, her ties to the entertainment industry creating a web that took prosecutors months to fully map. LaShawn Johnson, Tyson Jones, and Vernon Robinson. Federal charges: drug trafficking, conspiracy to distribute Schedule II controlled substances, and, thanks to 4 firearms that Agent Andrew Rogic had been practically vibrating to get to the FBI ballistics lab, conspiracy in connection with 3 related homicides. Their sentences would be measured in decades. The case file grew to 11 volumes. Agent Rogic's name appeared in the FBI briefs with increasing prominence, and David felt a quiet satisfaction at that. The man with the parallel pens and the gas station turkey club had earned it. Camilla received the DEA's operational commendation for leading the coordinated arrests, 21 targets across LA County, executed simultaneously, 0 complications. Roger Withers ensured that David's contribution was documented in the case file. The conceptual breakthrough, the device strategy, the financial analysis that had mapped the money trail. David's name appeared in the classified sections, not in the press releases. He was fine with that, more than fine. The commendation belonged to Camilla. She'd executed what he'd conceived, and the execution was the harder part, and she deserved every word of recognition. Their relationship moved from unofficial to official, with the bureaucratic simplicity of 2 people who'd spent enough of their lives navigating institutional procedures to know how to file the right forms. Roger was informed. David and Camilla were reassigned to separate operations, per agency policy governing romantic relationships between agents. David accepted his new role with something approaching gratitude: lead work, driving between interviews, taking notes in the field. The solitary mechanics of an agent with a car and a notepad. After months of headphones and surveillance rooms and the specific claustrophobia of listening to other people's lives through walls, the open road felt less like exile and more like ventilation. They moved in together in June, the apartment with the jacaranda tree. It was small enough that they learned each other's domestic rhythms by necessity. David left cabinet doors open, a habit that made Camilla, who'd grown up in a small Bogota apartment where an open cabinet door meant a forehead bruise, mildly insane. She couldn't sleep without the television on low, some procedural crime drama murmuring in the background, and David, who had spent enough of his professional life listening to ambient noise through speakers, craved silence the way a man in the desert craves water. They argued about the cabinets. They argued about the television. They argued about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom and whether cilantro belonged in scrambled eggs. It did, Camilla insisted, with the conviction of a woman whose Colombian mother would rise from any future grave to confirm it. They argued about bigger things less often. But when they did, when the fault lines of 2 damaged people sharing a small space inevitably shifted, the arguments carried a specific weight. The weight of 2 people who knew exactly what it cost to lose someone, who had watched, from adjacent chairs in a surveillance apartment, what happened when a relationship was allowed to erode without intervention. That knowledge made them more careful than most couples. It also made them more frightened. The 2 states were not, it turned out, mutually exclusive. It was not perfect. It was not supposed to be. One Tuesday evening, months after the case had been closed and the files archived, and the surveillance apartment returned to whatever landlord rented it to the next team of federal agents with headphones and bad coffee, David's phone buzzed. A text from a number he hadn't seen in weeks. Andrew Rogic. "Hey man, just wanted to say, I've worked a lot of cases. Never seen someone handle what you handled with that kind of discipline. You should know that." David read it twice. Set the phone on the kitchen counter. Made dinner, pasta, the one recipe he'd learned from a YouTube video that Camilla said was acceptable for a gringo. Ate it, washed the dish, dried his hands on the towel that Camilla had hung on the oven handle because she insisted towels belonged on oven handles, and David insisted they belonged literally anywhere else. He picked the phone back up.
Thanks, Andrew. Beers sometime?
Absolutely.
He put the phone down. The jacaranda outside the window was losing its blossoms, purple petals accumulating on the sidewalk below like confetti from a celebration that nobody had attended. In a few weeks, the tree would be bare. In a few months, it would bloom again. The cycle was indifferent to who was watching it. David found that comforting. Some things didn't require your participation to continue. A morning, any morning. The alarm, that electronic chirp that exists at the precise frequency of human irritation, designed not to wake you gently, but to inform you, with bureaucratic hostility, that consciousness is no longer optional. David reaches for his phone, silences it, lies there. The bedroom is different from the one he shared with Nora, smaller. The walls are a color Camilla chose after a 45-minute deliberation at the hardware store that David had endured with the patience of a man who understood that paint colors mattered to her in the same way that properly aligned pens mattered to Andrew Rogic, irrationally, deeply, and beyond negotiation.
It's sage.
It's green.
It's sage.
It was sage. David had learned that some arguments were won not by the person with the better case, but by the person who cared more. Camilla cared more about paint. David cared more about which shelf the coffee mugs went on. They had, without discussing it, developed a system of silent jurisdiction. She governed aesthetics, he governed the kitchen. The arrangement held. On the nightstand, his phone, a glass of water, and a photograph in a frame. David and Camilla at a restaurant. Their restaurant now, the one on Melrose, the one with no ghosts, taken by a waiter who had managed to cut off half of Camilla's head. They'd kept it. She was laughing in it, mouth open, eyes squeezed shut, the complete unguarding of a face that had spent years in surveillance rooms being carefully controlled. And David was looking at her instead of the camera. The imperfection was the point. Perfection was for people who hadn't learned yet that the off-center, the unplanned, the accidentally beautiful was where the truth lived. He gets up, walks to the kitchen. The apartment is quiet. The specific quiet of early morning, when the world outside the window is still negotiating between dark and light, and the jacaranda tree is a silhouette that could be anything. He makes coffee. 1 mug. The machine gurgles and hisses, performing its daily miracle of turning water and ground beans into the only substance that made 6:45 a.m. a survivable hour. From the bedroom, Camilla's alarm, a different sound from his. She uses the one that starts quiet and builds, because she claims the sudden chirp feels like being arrested by your own phone. David has pointed out that she literally arrests people for a living. She has pointed out that this is exactly why she doesn't want to experience it before breakfast. He reaches for a second mug, fills it, sets it on the counter. His hand pauses on the handle. With Nora, the handle always faced right, every morning, because David was right-handed. A small act of care that existed below the threshold of conscious thought, the kind of love that lived in the body's muscle memory, automated by years of proximity and attention. Nora had done it without knowing she was doing it, and David had received it without knowing he was receiving it. That was the cruelty of unconscious kindness. You didn't miss it until it was gone, and by then you couldn't remember when it started, only that its absence left a gap the exact size and shape of everything you'd taken for granted. He doesn't know which hand Camilla favors. He realizes, standing in this kitchen, in this apartment, in this life that didn't exist 6 months ago, that he has never asked. That they have shared a bed and a bathroom and a fight about cilantro and a weekend in the mountains and a case that changed both of their careers, and he has never once asked which hand she uses to pick up a coffee mug. He waits. Camilla appears in the kitchen doorway, half asleep, hair in the specific configuration that resulted from sleeping face down on a pillow for 7 hours, a geometry that defied physics and grooming in equal measure. She's wearing one of his t-shirts, the gray one from the academy, the one that hung to her mid-thigh and had a small hole near the collar that she claimed gave it character.
Which hand do you drink with?
What?
Your coffee. Which hand?
She looked at him. The question was strange. Too specific for 6:45 a.m., too deliberate for the sleepy mechanics of a weekday morning. But something in his face told her it wasn't a casual question. It was a question that had a room behind it, and the room had furniture, and the furniture had been there for a long time.
Left.
He turned the handle left. A small thing. A handle on a mug. The kind of detail that doesn't appear in case files or commendation letters or the narratives people construct when they tell the story of how they got from one life to the next. But it was there. A new direction, a new habit, built not on the ruins of the old one, but beside it, the way a city builds on the same ground using a different blueprint. The foundation remembers the previous structure. The new walls don't pretend it wasn't there. They just face a different direction. Camilla picked up the mug, took a sip, didn't comment on the handle. Maybe she noticed. Maybe she didn't. Maybe in a few months or a few years, she'd start doing it herself, turning David's handle to face right without thinking about it. The gesture migrating from conscious to automatic, from kindness to muscle memory, the way love does when it's given enough time and enough mornings to settle into the body's routine. David picks up his own mug. The morning light comes through the kitchen window at the angle that happens for about 15 minutes each day. The one that turns the counter gold, that catches the steam rising from the coffee and makes it glow, that transforms a galley kitchen in a one-bedroom apartment into something briefly, unreasonably beautiful. He notices it. He didn't used to. For a long time, through the surveillance and the discovery and the headphones and the arrest and the divorce and the plexiglass and the condensation fading from the glass, the light came and went and David was looking at something else. Always looking at something else. At monitors. At case files. At the ceiling of a surveillance apartment that looked like Bakersfield. At the inside of his own skull, where the replays ran on a loop he couldn't find the off switch for. He notices it now. The light. The steam. The color of the counter when the sun hits it right. Nora calls sometimes. He doesn't always answer. When he does, they talk logistics, the final asset distribution, a signature needed for the salon dissolution documents, the bureaucratic archaeology of a marriage being officially cataloged as complete. The conversations are short, they are civil, they have the careful, measured quality of two people navigating a shared history through the medium of paperwork. Once, near the end of one of these calls, a Thursday afternoon, David in his car between interviews, the phone on speaker, the Los Angeles traffic providing its usual percussion, she asks,
"Do you ever think about what could have been different?"
He pauses, longer than he means to. The traffic moves. A car horn sounds somewhere to his left. The sun is in his eyes.
Every day, but I think about what is more.
Silence on the line. Not empty silence, present silence. The kind that holds something without naming it.
Take care of yourself, Dave.
You too.
He hangs up, sits with it for a while, the phone dark on the passenger seat, the traffic inching forward. The silence after Nora's voice has a texture he couldn't have described a year ago. Not painful, not empty. Present. Like the sound a room makes after music stops. You can still feel it in the air, in the furniture, in the way the space holds the shape of what was playing even after the last note has faded. Someone who once mattered still exists, somewhere, carrying her own version of what happened. Her own memories, her own replays, her own 3 a.m. inventory of moments that could have gone differently. That's not a tragedy. It's not a triumph. It's just the way it is. Two people who shared a life now carry separate pieces of it, and the pieces don't fit together anymore, and they were never going to. And knowing that is not the same as being at peace with it, but it's close. It's as close as he's gotten. From the bedroom, Camilla's voice.
David, did you make coffee?
It's on the counter.
Handle facing left?
Handle facing left.
He hears her bare feet on the floor. The specific sound of someone walking toward you in the morning. Unhurried, unself-conscious. The sound of a person who trusts the ground beneath them and the room they're walking into and the man who made the coffee. It's a small sound. It won't appear in any case file. It will never be entered as evidence. It is not dramatic or cinematic or the kind of moment that stories are typically built around. But it's the sound of a life being constructed. Board by board, morning by morning, handle by handle. Imperfect, uncertain, built by two people who know exactly how quickly the whole thing can come apart because they've watched it happen. To themselves, to each other. Through headphones in a room that smelled like burnt carpet and bad coffee. They build anyway. David drinks his coffee. The light is gold. Somewhere in the other room, a woman he loves is picking up a mug he prepared for her, and the handle is facing the right direction. Not the right direction, the new direction. He notices the light. He notices the steam. He notices the 15 minutes of gold before the sun climbs and the counter goes ordinary again. He notices. Dr. Mind Commentary Number 3. Closing. This is not a story about revenge. It looks like one. It has the architecture of one. The wronged husband, the unfaithful wife, the surveillance, the arrest, the prison sentence. If you squint, you can see the shape of a revenge narrative underneath this story, the way you can see the shape of a previous building underneath a new one. The foundation is there, but the structure built on it faces a different direction. Revenge requires the desire to inflict suffering. David's actions inflicted suffering on Nora, on Alicia, on Nora's parents, on every woman who opened her salon or her nail bar on a Tuesday morning to find federal agents where her first clients should have been. But the infliction was not the purpose. The purpose was the case. The purpose was the law. The purpose was, underneath all the professional language and the warrants and the chain of evidence, survival. David Smith survived his wife's betrayal the only way he knew how, by being a federal agent, by doing the job, by channeling devastation into procedure and procedure into results and results into the specific measurable satisfaction of a case closed and a network dismantled. Whether that's healthy is a question for another day. Whether it's admirable is a question I'll leave to you. What I want to address is the coffee mug. Dr. Edith Eger is a psychologist who survived Auschwitz. She was 16 years old when she was separated from her parents at the gates of the camp. Her mother was sent to the gas chambers. Edith survived by dancing for Josef Mengele, the angel of death, because a fellow prisoner told her that dancing might keep her alive. She danced. She survived. She spent the next several decades becoming one of the most respected trauma psychologists in the world. In her book, The Choice, she writes, "Suffering is universal, but victimhood is optional. We always have a choice in how we respond." David chose forward. Not triumphantly. Triumph is for stories with cleaner endings than this one. Stories where the hero walks into a sunset and the music swells and the credits roll over an image of someone smiling. David's forward looks like a one-bedroom apartment with sage walls and a jacaranda tree outside the window. It looks like a woman in his t-shirt asking about coffee. It looks like a handle turned to the left. He carries both truths. He was wronged, and he wasn't blameless. Nora made her choices. The drugs, the sex, the exit fund, the lies, and those choices were hers, fully and permanently. And David made his absences. The late nights, the missed conversations, the coffee mug with the handle facing right that he received every morning without once asking what it meant or saying thank you. Neither truth cancels the other. They coexist. Like two tenants in an apartment who don't speak but share a wall. Over time, the silence between them has become less hostile and more like weather, a condition of the space. Not comfortable, not uncomfortable. Just there. The coffee mug. That's the whole story if you know how to read it. A man learned a small kindness from one woman. The relationship that taught him that kindness is over, destroyed by betrayal and distance and the slow dimming of lights that neither of them noticed until the room was dark. But the kindness itself survived. It crossed the gap between one life and the next. It just changed direction. Not everyone gets this outcome. Not everyone walks out of a prison and finds someone leaning against the car in a blue dress, waiting. Not everyone's wreckage resolves into a quiet morning with gold light on the counter and a handle facing the right way. David knows this. He knows it because he's seen the other outcomes. In case files, in visiting rooms, in the faces of men and women whose damage didn't resolve but metastasized, spreading from the original wound into every relationship and every room and every morning that followed. He's seen what happens when people choose bitterness. He's seen what happens when they choose denial. He's seen the cost of both. He chose forward, and because he knows what forward cost him, and what it almost didn't survive, he holds what he has with the particular care of a man who understands that good things are not guaranteed. They are chosen, daily, deliberately, with open eyes and the full, unsentimental awareness that it could all come apart again. It won't. Probably. But the probably is the price of admission. And David is willing to pay it. Every morning, handle facing left.